Welcome to Sunday Sermons from the Williamsburg Community Chapel, brought to you by the Chapel Podcast Network. Let's grab our Bibles and open up to the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, and verses 27 through 36. And I'll read verses 27 and 28 for us now, as we prepare to hear from Travis Simone as he helps us continue in our sermon series titled Life in Exile. Daniel answered the king and said, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these."
I was at a Tribe basketball game last weekend. It's a good watch this year. You should come out, especially this coming Saturday. You may just get a nice surprise. But as I was at this game, I sat in front of a yeller. And this guy had a lot of thoughts about what was going on in the court, especially about the referees. If you've ever sat in front of a yeller, you know the experience. And his constant refrain was, 8 seconds. It's an 8-second violation. You see, there's a certain amount of time you have to bring the ball up the court to get it out of the back court into the front court. And he kept screaming, "That's 8 seconds. Can you not count, referees? How could you miss this again and again? 8 seconds." And my friend that I was sitting with elbowed me and knows what everyone who knows a little bit about sports knows as I'm telling this story right now. He elbows me and goes, "The rule's 10 seconds in college. It's 8 seconds in NBA basketball. It's 10 seconds in college." This guy is yelling and yelling without even knowing the rules of the game. In the same way, there are 2 rules for how long you have to bring the ball up the court in basketball, depending on the context, college versus pro. Through Daniel, God provides 2 principles to help us faithfully embrace life in exile, depending on the content. God gives us 2 principles to react in 2 different ways, depending on the content of what we are facing in exile. In Daniel 1, we see Daniel both reject certain aspects of life in exile, even as he readily accepts others. He rejects his Babylonian name and food, while he accepts his Babylonian education and job. And this is just a quick review of last week. The name represents Babylonian identity. The food represents loyalty to Babylon. The education is the value of Babylon. And the job is an investment in Babylon. Let me put it like this. Faithfully embracing life in exile means rejecting the identity of Babylon and loyalty to Babylon, while still accepting the value of Babylon and investing in Babylon. It means knowing when to call out an 8-second violation and remembering there are other ways to play the game. Which brings us to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a deep dive into the practical application side of things. Practically applying how do we faithfully work in, and in Daniel's case, work for Babylon. Daniel's job is both complex and dangerous. It's complex because he must work in the midst of an idolatrous culture, understanding its language, literature, culture, and customs without participating in its sinful behavior. It's dangerous because he works for a volatile boss with a penchant not for dismissing people with performance issues, but for destroying people who can't get the job done. See, all work in Babylon, both ancient and modern, is complex and dangerous. We all face the complexity of knowing what policies to support and which ones to challenge, what conversations to take part in and which conversations to leave, knowing when to attend a party and when to stay home. For Daniel, his life was in danger. For us, it can be our livelihoods, our promotion, our raise, our reputation, our witness to the gospel. Really, what's at stake is our ability to faithfully embrace life in exile. And in the midst of all that complexity and danger, Daniel 2 offers us the way forward when it comes to work in Babylon. You'll see Daniel 2 gives you practical application about how to accept certain things about life in Babylon. Daniel 3 next week will show you practical application about how to reject certain parts of life in Babylon. But here in Daniel 2, we see the pattern and promise of faithful work in exile. The pattern and the promise of faithful work in exile. See, faithful work in exile is, first of all, skillful work. Look at verse 4 with me, and I don't usually do this, but I put a footnote on your song sheet because it's important understanding what's going on here. So look at your song sheet, verse 4. Should be in your Bible too if you have a printed Bible. But verse 4 says this: the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show you the interpretation." Now look at the footnote. The text from chapter 2, verse 4, all the way to the end of chapter 7 switches over to Aramaic. It shifts from Hebrew, chapter 1, all the way through chapter 2, verse 3 is written like the vast majority of the Old Testament in Hebrew. And then all of a sudden, chapter 2, verse 4, you get this change to Aramaic. Now remember how they accepted their Babylonian education in chapter 1. This reveals why that was such a critical choice. If they had rejected their training, they would be completely lost when they get to chapter 2, verse 4. They would not only be shut out from participating in the work God called them to do in Babylon, but they would be unable to make the impact God sent them to make on Babylon. It is Daniel's commitment to learning the skills, the language, the literature of Babylon that allow him to faithfully work in exile. Over Christmas break, I was having a conversation with one of my nephews, Saul. And Saul is a hilarious person. I wish everyone in this room could have a conversation with my nephew, Saul. My nephew, Saul, is a 7th grade boy, and he is all that is 7th grade boy. And he is in his 2nd year of middle school, and I was asking him, "How's it going? Saul, tell me, what are you doing in school these days?" And he told me he was taking French, which I said, that's kind of an odd choice because half of Nina's family is Puerto Rican. Her mom's Puerto Rican, her grandfather, who's still alive, Spanish is his native tongue, and so there's a lot of Spanish that gets spoken in the house. I said, "Saul, if Spanish is a prized skill in the Strickland Dominici household, why would you take French?" And he goes, "Look, Trav, I don't want to know what my grandma is yelling at my great-grandfather. I just don't want to know. There's a lot of yelling. I don't want to know what they're talking about." And so I decided to take French. I said, "Well, Saul, if you learned any French words, tell me, how's your vocabulary?" He goes, "Yeah, I've learned a lot." I said, "Give me some." He goes, "Croissant." Ballet. I said, "Anything else, Saul?" He said, Paris, Eiffel. I said, "Anything else?" And he hit me with my favorite. He goes, "Baguette, Uncle Travis." See, if Daniel and his friends had approached their studies in the same way that my nephew Saul approached his French studies, they'd be done by the time they get to chapter 2, verse 4. You see, The first sign of faithful work in Babylon is skillful work. To be a Christian lawyer starts with being a skilled lawyer. To be a Christian teacher starts with being a skilled teacher. To be a Christian doctor starts with being good at what you do. To be to be a Christian parent is to be a skilled parent, to understand development and the emotional makeup of children. To be a Christian serviceman or servicewoman in the military is to be skilled at your craft, to understand the system well. See, in many ways, Daniel 2 verse 4 is the key to understanding the feeling the author wants you to have as you read the rest of the book. It's disorienting from here on out. It's hard to understand for the remainder of the book till the end of chapter 7. So is work in Babylon. So is understanding the culture. So is understanding its idols and its temptations. So note the skill with which Daniel diffuses the life and death situation that he and all the wise men of Babylon face. It's in verses 12 through 14. I realize this is not on your song sheets. We can only print so much. So if you have a paper Bible or an app on your phone, I'm in Daniel chapter 2, verse 12. Listen to the skill Daniel uses here. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Prudence, discretion. Daniel is careful with his words. He doesn't just pop off what he thinks about the day's events with a quick Facebook post. He doesn't just say whatever's on his mind. He's careful with his words. Then he asks great questions. Look at verse 15. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the king the interpretation of the dream. Questions to gain more information, to buy time to think through what a wise response would be. And then notice what he does when he goes into Nebuchadnezzar. He makes a request for Nebuchadnezzar to set the time. He lets Nebuchadnezzar still drive the conversation. He doesn't walk into Nebuchadnezzar's office and say, 8-second violation, Nebuchadnezzar. What are you doing? This is nuts. Why are you trying to kill me and my friends and all the wise men of Babylon? 8 seconds. No. The skill to learn the language, to know what to say and what not to say, to ask questions. This is the pattern of faithful work in Babylon. Faithful work is skillful work, and faithful work is prayerful work. Look at verses 17 through 19 with me. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. As important as it is to be skilled in the work you do in exile, it is more important to remember that human skill alone cannot produce faithful work in exile. Daniel obtains knowledge of the king's dream and its interpretation, not by reading the right books, attending the best schools, or getting the right internships. Daniel obtains the knowledge of the king's dream and its interpretation through prayer. we tend to pray for safety, for the health of our friends and family, the flourishing of our children. How much do you pray for your work? How much do you pray for the complex issues that stem from working in exile? Are we praying for Babylon? Remember Jeremiah 29, he said, seek the welfare of the city and pray to the Lord on its behalf. A biblical scholar named John Goldingay helped me see that the paradigm here is of a person who uses all of their intellectual capability to make an impact in the place where God has sent them and has the humility to get on their knees before God. That's the combination. It's both hard work and humility that Daniel exhibits. Daniel doesn't only display the humility to pray, he also has the humility to tell anyone who will listen that he is not wise enough or industrious enough on his own to do what the king has asked. Look at verses 27 through 28. Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. See, it is only when we humble ourselves before God through prayer that faithful work in exile is possible. It is no exaggeration reading this story to say that apart from prayer, Daniel is dead. Faithful work in exile is prayerful work. And it's truthful work. Let me just summarize the dream that Daniel reveals to the king. There is a statue. It's quite large, and we learn that it's gleaming and bright. And there are 4 parts to this statue. The head is made of gold, and then the chest is made of silver. The middle part is made of bronze. The legs are iron, and the feet are clay mixed with iron. And then there's a rock that's cut from a piece of stone, but it's cut not with human hands. It's mysteriously cut and appears. It goes and it smashes the statue. It hits the statue right at its most vulnerable part, the feet, where the iron and the clay are mixed together. And all of a sudden, that small rock starts to grow and grow, and eventually it fills the whole earth. And then Daniel says to the king, that's the dream. Here's the interpretation. You're the golden head. You're the head. The 4 metals in the vision, in the dream, represent 4 different kingdoms. And you're the first kingdom. But after you, the silver, comes another kingdom. It's going to be inferior to your kingdom. And then there's going to come another kingdom. It's made of bronze. It's even further inferior to the kingdom silver. And then there will be a kingdom represented by the iron. Iron smashes stuff. And that kingdom is going to go through the whole earth and just smash smaller, weaker kingdoms. But remember, the iron is mixed with clay at the feet. It's vulnerable because it's a divided kingdom, Daniel says. And eventually, the rock, which represents the kingdom of God, the true kingdom, run by the true king, will hit that divided kingdom of iron and clay where it is most vulnerable, and it will fall. Verses 44 to 45. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a king that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end. and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. So here's the shock. Here's the shock. Daniel is looking straight into the eyes of the most powerful man in the world. Straight into the eyes of the man who has gone out and conquered other kingdoms and brought these people from their kingdoms into his kingdom and tried to assimilate them into Babylon. This man goes about doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants it, and Daniel looks at him and says, "You're done. It won't last. You are building on a foundation of clay so brittle that it can't withstand the blow of a simple, solitary rock. The God who revealed this dream to me will pound on your so-called golden kingdom till it is dust, worthless as chaff after the kernels of wheat are removed. Your kingdom will be so fully defeated, empty, and weightless that it will be driven away by something as common as a gust of wind." Two questions stem from this moment of truthfulness that Daniel has with the king. First, are you building a golden kingdom on a foundation of clay? Second, are you looking for and skillfully taking opportunities to share the truth through your work? How easy would it have been for Daniel to go, "Well, king, it's complicated. Good news and bad news here. But you're the best. You're the golden one, but there's going to be some problems later." No, he tells him the truth. He tells the king the truth. So I want to talk about the truth in our working lives for a moment. I want to speak for a minute, particularly to people who own their own business or executives, people that have a lot of sway in their business over lots of employees. Let me ask you a few questions. Is your business growing, but you've kept a disproportionate amount of the profits for yourself? Is your business growing, but you're not increasing your giving? Did you take advantage of rising prices, even though nothing about your cost structure changed? Do you speak well of your competitors and honor their reputations in the community? Do you treat all your customers and all your employees with the dignity and respect they deserve as image bearers of the one true God? Now for everyone, for all of us who do any job in Babylon, which is all of us, I think truthful work looks like someone asking you to go 1 mile and you go 2. Honoring God's command to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. To do unto others as you would have them do unto you. To honor the wisdom of God's rhythm of work and rest instilled in the fabric of creation and recorded in the 4th commandment. See, I think this issue of work and rest is something where Christians, we have capitulated to the culture of Babylon. And we've done it so much for so long, we can't even see it anymore. It's become a real blind spot for us. See, Christians are often so concerned about the sexual values of Babylon, they end up swallowing the business values of Babylon instead. And so it's important to make sure all of the values of Babylon are pushed back against and checked. And this is one where I think we've missed it as believers. Just want to read this from Deuteronomy chapter 5. I won't do a whole lot of commentary. but just the conviction that comes from the reading and hearing of God's word. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 13. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant or your female servant, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Sharing the truth. What an uncomfortable thing for Daniel to say to the king. The whole kingdom thing, yeah, about that. Not a long-term play. Not going to end well. But I want you to take notice of the king's reaction. It's in verses 46 and 47. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. He accepts the truth on some level that Daniel brings to him. How can this be? And what does this have to say to us who are timid about sharing the truth through our work in Babylon? Somewhere deep inside every Babylonian fears they've built their life on a foundation of clay. At some point, every Babylonian can't sleep, wondering, is what I've given my life to going to last? It's how the whole story starts. Look at verse 1, and let this be an encouragement to you. People are desperate for the truth. They're up late at night longing for someone to reveal the truth to them. Look at verse 1 of our passage. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. This is the second year of his reign. If you know a little history, he's having great success. He's conquering all these little kings all around him, and yet he can't sleep. He's troubled. He's wondering if he's building on a foundation of clay, and Daniel says, the truth is, you are. I recently sat with a man in my office who told me that he wanted to tell me his life story. I listened to his story. It was painful. There was a lot of difficulty. There was addiction. There was division, relationships lost in this story. And I kept waiting for him to get to the part of the story where he was going to tell me how it turned around, what changed. And I realized about halfway through, oh no, this is not a past tense story. This is where he is right now, and he doesn't know what to do. And I found an appropriate time to break in. I said, I want to ask you a question. Do you want to be born again into a brand new life? I understand all of this stuff that has happened and the pain and the brokenness and all of that. And we could talk about how you could mend some of those things and fix some of those things. But the God I believe in, who revealed himself in Jesus Christ, he doesn't just talk about a better life. He talks about a brand new life. So do you want to be born again into a brand new life? And I had the privilege of telling him that Jesus Christ is the rock that smashes the clay foundations of our lives. Jesus Christ is the rock that provides the firm foundation for a new life in him. It's what we sang earlier. Christ is my firm foundation. He's the rock on which I stand. And this is all over the New Testament. The New Testament writers knew what the rock in Nebuchadnezzar's dream pointed to. Peter talks about it in Acts chapter 4, verse 11. He says, this Jesus is the stone that was rejected by you, the builders, which has become the cornerstone. And how did Peter know to put that in his sermon in the book of Acts? Well, Jesus told him in Matthew chapter 16, verse 8, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. What's the rock? Peter just confessed that Jesus is the Christ. Christ means king. Peter said, you're the king who's bringing about the true and eternal kingdom. And Jesus says, that's the rock. My kingship, my kingdom, that's the rock upon which I build my church. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. He's the rock. And I would not be practicing truthful work right now if I did not pause and ask, does anyone feel like they've got feet made of clay? Does anyone in this room feel like their feet are made of clay and you've been trying to mix in a little iron, but it just won't bond. It just won't strengthen the clay foundation of your life? Place your faith in the rock that is Jesus Christ, and you will stand on the firmest of foundations. You see, faithful work is skillful work, it's prayerful work, and it's truthful work. That's the pattern of faithful work. And I know that sounds difficult. And I know that sounds complicated. In fact, it's actually impossible. So there is a promise that stands behind the pattern of faithful work. And the promise of faithful work comes to us in verse 34. This is when Daniel answers the king. He says, and you looked, and a stone was cut out by no human hand. And it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. No human hands. Take note that the rock is the least valuable material in the whole dream. There's gold, there's silver, there's bronze, there's iron. Even clay can be shaped into valuable household objects. And all of a sudden, there's this thing of little to no value, this rock, and it takes down the whole thing. The promise of faithful work is that God is at work while we work. No human hands. God is at work while we work. And God will use our faithful work to bring about his eternal kingdom. God uses Daniel's work to put the whole vision into motion. Nebuchadnezzar is humbled. The golden statue begins to fall. God is at work while we work. And God will use our faithful work to bring about his eternal kingdom. Which is why Jesus said something like this: the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked its way all through the dough. Let's get to work. Let's get to faithful work in exile.
Thank you for joining us today. Here at the Williamsburg Community Chapel, we are all about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we hope you will join us this year as we study the biblical theme of exile and learn how to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land.